The alien lecture hall was massive, built with silver walls that glowed softly in the dim light. Hundreds of students from across the galaxy filled the curved rows of seats, their shapes and colors so different, it looked like a living zoo. Some had wings that twitched nervously, others had scaled hides that glimmered under the lights, and many had sharp claws resting on the railings. But in the very back, sitting quietly and unnoticed, was a young human student named Daniel. He was the only human in this academy, and most aliens thought of him as strange, fragile, or even harmless. At the center of the stage stood Professor Zealand, a tall alien with skin that shimmered like liquid bronze. His 4 arms moved gracefully as he spoke, his long tendrils glowing with every word. Zealand was famous across the stars as the greatest biologist of the age. He had traveled to countless worlds, observed hundreds of ecosystems, and written the great book known as Predators of the Galaxy. Today he was giving a lecture on apex predators, those creatures that ruled their worlds with fear and strength. His voice echoed, sharp and commanding. An apex predator, he said, is the highest hunter of its ecosystem. It has no rivals, no threats. It sits at the very top of the chain. The audience leaned in, some letting out low growls of respect, others clicking their mandibles in agreement. The professor waved one hand and a hologram appeared. A massive beast from the planet Varkal filled the air, its jaws wide, filled with teeth like swords. This is the Varkulian devourer, the professor explained. It hunts creatures 3 times its size. It has survived unchanged for 1,000 generations, a perfect killing machine. Gasps of respect echoed through the hall. Another wave, and a different image appeared. A winged beast, eyes glowing red, scales shimmering with poison, the Scarab. Deathwing, Zealand announced proudly. It drops from the skies without warning. Its venom kills in seconds. No creature dares challenge it. A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the students. The lecture continued. Predator after predator appeared in shining light, each more terrifying than the last. The black maw serpent, the ironhide stalker, the Krasic spine beast. Monsters that seemed pulled from nightmares. Every time the professor explained how they dominated their world, how nothing could resist them. Daniel sat quietly, his hands folded, his face calm, but his eyes were sharp, watching every detail, every word. He could feel the energy in the room, the awe, the respect for these alien creatures. And yet deep inside, he felt something else, something no one in the hall seemed to notice. The professor finished with a flourish. He spread all 4 arms wide, his tendrils glowing bright. And so, he declared, we have covered the great predators of the galaxy, the masters of their domains, the rulers of life itself. The hall erupted in applause, a strange mix of claps, screeches, and wing beats. Aliens looked at one another with pride, sharing stories of their own worlds and beasts. Some glanced at Daniel with amusement, as if wondering what a weak little human could possibly think in a place like this. But Daniel slowly raised his hand. At first, no one noticed, but then the professor's glowing eyes turned toward the back of the hall. Yes, Zealand said, his voice carrying authority. The human wishes to speak? The room quieted, a few snickers echoing from the sides. Daniel stood up slowly, his movements calm but steady. His voice was not loud, but it carried clearly. Professor, he said, you forgot one. A heavy silence fell across the hall. Aliens blinked, their scales shifting in confusion. The professor tilted his head, his tendrils fly Sci-Fi, caring dimly. Forgot one? He asked, his voice amused. Impossible, human. I have studied them all. Every predator of every world. Which one do you claim I missed? Daniel's face remained calm, his eyes steady as he looked out across the rows of alien students. The silence grew heavier, the air thick, every creature waiting to hear his answer. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice soft, almost a whisper. You forgot us. The words hung in the air like a blade, sharp and cutting. For a moment the hall was completely still. Then slowly, murmurs began to spread, whispers, laughs, and growls of disbelief. Aliens turned to one another, some sneering, some chuckling. A frail-looking human, calling themselves a predator? The idea was ridiculous, even insulting. The professor's tendrils glowed brighter, and he leaned forward, smiling with 4 sharp teeth. Us, he repeated, mocking the words. You mean to say humans are an apex predator? His laugh echoed, soon joined by the deep rumble of alien voices across the hall. Daniel did not laugh. He did not flinch. He only stood straighter, his hands at his sides, his eyes locked on the professor. The laughter filled the room, loud and mocking. But the human's calm silence began to feel heavier than the noise, and slowly the laughter faltered. Something in Daniel's gaze made even the most savage cadets shift uncomfortably in their seats. The professor narrowed his glowing eyes, suddenly less amused. Well then, human, he said softly, his voice no longer playful but sharp. Perhaps you will explain yourself. Daniel smiled faintly, and with a voice steady as steel, he answered, Gladly. The hall exploded with noise. Alien voices clashed together, some deep and growling, others sharp and hissing, some clicking mandibles like knives striking stone. The laughter rolled like thunder, mocking, cruel, unstoppable. Every species seemed united in one thing. The idea that a human could claim to be a predator was absurd. A tall insectoid cadet slammed its claw on the railing, its voice filled. With scorn, prey species, it hissed. Humans are fragile skin and soft bones. Even your claws are missing. You are prey pretending to be hunters. Another alien with heavy scales barked in laughter. They bleed too easily. They freeze too easily. They break too easily. Predators? No, they are cattle. Daniel stood still, the storm of ridicule washing over him. He did not shrink back. He did not show anger. He only waited, his face calm, but his eyes burning with a steady fire. The professor raised one long arm, and the hall slowly grew quieter, though the amusement still lingered like smoke in the air. Very bold words, human, Professor Zealand said with a cruel smile, his glowing tendrils flickering. You claim your kind are predators, apex predators no less. So tell us, what makes your species fit to stand beside the devourer, the deathwing, the maw serpent? Daniel's voice was steady, calm, but beneath it was steel. We are not beside them, he said. We are above them. The silence that followed was heavier than before. For a moment, even the clicking claws and restless wings stopped. Aliens stared at him, some in disbelief, some in anger, some even in sudden unease. The insectoid cadet hissed loudly. Above? Lies, it spat. You are weak prey that run from danger. No predator fears you. Daniel turned his gaze toward it, his voice cutting through the hall like a blade. Every predator fears us, even if they don't know it yet. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Some aliens shouted angrily, others leaned forward, drawn in by the strange power in his words. The professor's eyes glowed brighter, the amusement on his face starting to fade. Explain, he demanded. Tell us what makes you claim such arrogance. Daniel's jaw tightened and he began. On my world, we were not born the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest. We had no fangs, no claws, no wing. There's no poison. He stepped forward slowly, his voice clear. But we had hunger, and we had minds that refused to lose. He spoke of Earth, of the endless hunt. He told them of humans who stalked beasts larger than themselves, creatures with horns, tusks, and claws sharper than steel. He explained how humans invented weapons, sharpened stone, learned fire, how they ran for hours chasing prey across the plains, not faster, but tireless, relentless, never giving up until the beast collapsed from exhaustion. That was persistence hunting, the art of wearing giants down until they fell. Aliens shifted in their seats, eyes narrowing, some exchanging uneasy glances. No predator they knew hunted that way. No predator chased forever. No predator fought with such patience. Daniel's voice grew darker, stronger. We learned to work together, to outsmart, to adapt, to kill things far stronger than us, because survival gave us no choice. He looked straight at the professor. Where your predators have claws, we built spears. Where they had armor, we made fire. Where they had poison, we made strategy. And when one beast fell, we hunted a bigger one. The insectoid cadet pounded its claw again, trying to break the tension. Stories, it shouted, old tales of prey trying to sound dangerous, but apex predators do not need tools. Daniel's eyes locked on it like a predator spotting its prey. You think tools make us weak, he whispered, his voice sharp as a knife. But our tools are part of us. Our mind is the fang that never breaks. Our fire is the claw that never dulls. and our will is the one weapon no predator can escape. The hall grew restless. The sneers began to falter, replaced by something else. Unease, the slow, creeping realization that perhaps the human was not just speaking bravado. Some of the younger students lowered their gazes, unwilling to meet his eyes. Professor Zeeland leaned forward, studying him now with genuine interest. "And you claim this makes your species superior to predators who are born to kill, you expect us to believe humans are more dangerous than beasts that have ruled their worlds for millennia." Daniel's lips curled in the faintest smile, but there was no warmth in it. "We do not expect you to believe," he said softly. "We expect you to remember. The galaxy forgot once before, it should not forget again." A cold hush spread across the hall. Even the air seemed heavy, as though the shadows themselves leaned closer to listen. Aliens stared at Daniel, no longer with mockery, but with the first seeds of fear. The insectoid cadet hissed again, but its voice lacked the earlier strength. "If you claim so much, then prove it, human. Prove you are what you say." The professor's glowing tendrils brightened, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Yes," he said slowly. "Perhaps that is the only way. A demonstration, a challenge. Would you accept such a trial, human?" All eyes turned to Daniel, some eager for his humiliation, others suddenly unsure what they truly wished to see. Daniel stood tall, his face calm, his eyes sharp. "I accept," he said, his voice like iron, and with those words the hall erupted again, not with laughter, but with excitement, fear, and anticipation. A trial was coming, a test of predator against predator, and the human had just stepped into the fire. The challenge was set, but before the trial could begin, Daniel stood firm in the lecture hall, his calm eyes fixed on the professor. The alien cadets jeered, some clicking their mandibles, some letting out sharp laughs, others whispering that the human would be broken in seconds. But Daniel did not answer them with more words. Not yet. Instead, he stepped forward, his voice steady, his gaze like a blade. "You want proof," he said. "Then first you must understand what we are." The professor raised a brow ridge, curious, his glowing tendrils flickering softly. "Speak then, human, enlighten us, show us this truth you believe." Daniel nodded once, then began to tell a story, not with pride but with a weight that pressed on every word. He spoke of Earth, the world humans came from, a world not of safety, but of death and struggle. He told them of giant predators that once roamed his planet, creatures like the saber-toothed cat with fangs long enough to pierce bone, the dire wolves that hunted in packs, the mammoths that crushed hunters beneath their tusks, and yet, humans survived them all, not because of strength, not because of speed, but because humans learned to outthink, to outlast, to never stop hunting. The aliens shifted, some growing quieter, some glancing at each other uneasily. Daniel's voice carried across the hall like the steady beat of a war drum. "Every predator on Earth had something we did not. They had claws, they had muscle, they had venom. But we had patience, we had fire, and we had the will to hunt them even when the cost was high." He described persistence hunting, where humans would run after prey for hours, chasing it across plains, following its tracks, its breath, its sweat, until the beast collapsed. "No claws," he said, "no fangs, just endurance and determination, and in the end, the giant fell, and we claimed victory." The insectoid cadet scoffed, though its voice carried less strength now. "Old tales, nothing more. Beasts die eventually. Even prey may stumble upon food if it waits long enough." Daniel turned his eyes toward it, sharp and cutting. "We did not wait," he said. "We chose, we hunted, and we ended lives larger and stronger than ours, because we refused to be prey." The professor's eyes narrowed, the glow of his tendrils shifting from amusement to focus. "You speak of your past, but the galaxy is filled with predators still. Do you claim humans could stand against them as well?" Daniel's lips curved in a faint, cold smile. "We already have," he said softly. The hall grew still again, the words echoing like a shadow over every seat. Aliens leaned forward, waiting, unsure if the human was boasting or confessing something darker. Daniel spoke of wars, not between man and beast, but between man and man. He told them how humans learned not only to hunt, but to turn that skill upon themselves, to forge weapons not just for survival, but for conquest. On Earth, the most dangerous predator we ever faced was ourselves, Daniel said, and we learned how to kill not just with strength, but with strategy, with fire, with tools, and later with machines that shook the sky. Gasps rippled across the rows, some aliens clicking in disbelief, others shrinking back as if the words alone carried danger. Daniel's voice grew darker, his tone never rising, but sharpening like the edge of a knife. We do not stop when the hunt is over. We do not stop when the prey falls. We evolve. We adapt. We make war into something beyond instinct. We turned it into science, into art, into memory that never dies. The professor's gaze hardened, but for the first time, there was no amusement in his eyes. He leaned forward and asked slowly, "And do you believe this makes you more dangerous than every predator of the galaxy, human?" Daniel's answer came like a blade thrust in silence. "I do not believe," he whispered. "I know." The room stirred, some cadets hissing in anger, others trembling in unease. The insectoid cadet rose again, desperate to tear the human's words apart. "Words," it spat. "Stories, nothing more. No proof, no blood, only prey's attempt to sound like hunter." Daniel's calm gaze shifted to it, and for the first time his voice carried a low growl. "You want blood, you will see. It's soon enough." The challenge was now no longer a suggestion, it was demanded. The professor's tendrils glowed brightly as he nodded. "Very well," he said. "The arena shall be prepared, and the galaxy will see if the human speaks truth or hides behind old myths." The hall erupted again, but this time it was not just laughter. It was anticipation, fear, excitement. Every student leaned forward, eager to see the human broken, or perhaps for reasons they would not admit, to see if his words carried the shadow of truth. Daniel stood alone at the center of the storm. He did not boast. He did not smirk. He simply stood tall, his eyes steady, his presence sharp as a blade, and in that moment, even without claws or fangs, he looked exactly like what he claimed to be, a predator waiting. The arena doors opened with a deep metallic groan, echoing through the great hall. Alien students rushed to their seats above, eager to watch the strange spectacle. The trial had been called, a combat demonstration, predator against predator, and the human had accepted without hesitation. Whispers filled the air, some voices mocking, some nervous, some curious, but all waiting to see if Daniel would survive even a single moment. The arena itself was vast, built of dark stone and glowing energy barriers. It was used by the Academy to test cadets, to pit them against controlled simulations of deadly beasts. Today, however, it was no ordinary simulation. Professor Zealand himself had chosen the opponent, a towering reptilian cadet named Krivak, known for his savage strength and his pride in breaking challengers. Krivak stepped into the arena with a roar, his scaled body glistening under the lights, his claws clicking against the ground. He towered over Daniel, his muscles thick, his jaw lined with teeth sharp enough to tear through steel hide. The crowd cheered for him, hissing and growling, their voices rolling like thunder. Krivak raised his arms, basking in their praise, his eyes burning with hatred as he looked at the sea. While humans standing across from him, Daniel entered silently, his steps calm, his face still, his eyes never leaving his opponent. He carried no weapon, no armor, no shield, just the simple academy uniform he always wore. His calmness unsettled some of the younger cadets, who expected fear, trembling, or excuses. Instead, he stood as if the noise, the jeers, the glowing lights did not exist at all. Professor Zealand's voice echoed through the chamber. "Today we see the truth. Is the human predator? Or is he prey? Let the trial decide." The horn sounded, sharp and final. Krivak lunged forward with terrifying speed, claws flashing, jaws opening wide. The crowd roared, certain it would be over in seconds. But Daniel did not move in panic. He stepped aside with a calmness that looked almost casual. Krivak's claws slashed the air where the human had been, striking nothing. The cadet snarled, spinning around, his heavy tail sweeping across the arena floor. Daniel ducked under it, sliding low, his eyes watching every movement, every twitch of muscle. He was not faster, not stronger, but he was watching, learning, adapting. The crowd grew louder, some shouting insults, others beginning to fall silent, unsure of what they were seeing. Daniel spoke then, his voice calm even as claws flashed inches from his skin. "Do you see the difference, Krivak? You strike with rage, but rage blinds you," Krivak roared, slamming his claws into the ground, sending cracks through the stone. Daniel leapt back, using the broken stone as cover, his movements precise, efficient. He waited, baiting Krivak into another charge. The reptilian cadet lunged, his claws raised, his body wide open. In that instant, Daniel stepped aside and shoved with all his weight, not to overpower but to misdirect. Krivak stumbled into the broken stone, his claws sinking into a trap of jagged rock he himself had crawled. Heated gasps echoed through the arena. Daniel's voice carried again, calm, almost cold. "We do not match you with strength. We break you with your own." Krivak ripped his claws free with a snarl, rage burning hotter now. He struck again and again, wild, reckless, desperate to crush the human. But each time Daniel moved just enough, dodging, redirecting, turning the alien's fury into wasted energy. The reptilian's breath grew heavier, his movements slower, while the human remained steady, calm, calculating. The professor leaned forward, his glowing tendrils flickering in unease. He had expected the human to fall quickly, to be torn apart before the crowd. Instead, he saw something far more dangerous, not just survival, but control. Krivak swung one final time, his claws coming down like a storm. Daniel caught a shard of broken stone and deflected the strike, the claws missing by inches. In that moment, Daniel stepped into Krivak's guard, his hand striking the reptilian's throat with precise force. Krivak staggered back, choking, his eyes wide with shock. Daniel did not press the attack, he simply stepped back, his voice echoing clear. "You call us prey, but prey does not choose when the predator falls." The arena fell silent, the crowd frozen in disbelief. Krivak, the cadet who had broken many challengers before, now knelt on the ground, coughing. Defeated not by brute force, but by patience and precision, Professor Zalin's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "This was only the beginning, human. You have skill, but skill alone does not make you predator." Daniel turned toward him, his eyes steady, his words like a quiet thunder. "Then give me more," he said, "and I will show you why you should never forget us." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. For the first time, the crowd did not laugh, did not jeer. They only stared, because in Daniel's calm voice they heard no fear, no weakness, only the cold certainty of a hunter who had already chosen his prey. The arena was silent, for the first time since He challenge began. No alien dared to laugh. Krivak, the reptilian cadet, still knelt on the cracked stone floor, clutching his throat, his glowing eyes wide with disbelief. And Daniel, the human, stood calm and steady, not panting, not trembling, only watching with the patience of a hunter who knew the fight was never just about claws and strength. The silence broke with a roar. "Unfair!" shouted a tusked alien from the stands, slamming its fists against the railing. "Trickery!" hissed another with sharp mandibles. "He used deception, not strength. No true predator hides behind tricks." The crowd erupted, half jeering, half whispering in uneasy tones. Some shouted that Daniel was weak. Others began to wonder if perhaps weakness was only what their eyes wanted to believe. Professor Zalin raised a hand and the noise dimmed, his glowing tendrils pulsing with a strange rhythm. "Impressive," he said, his voice low but sharp. "But one fight does not prove your claim, human. If you are predator, then face another." Daniel nodded once, calm as always. "Send them," he said. The professor's eyes narrowed, but he gestured. A new figure stepped forward, taller than Krivak, a beast-like cadet covered in thick armor plates, its arms ending in claws like hooked blades. This was Jirok, known as the Iron Claw, undefeated in every sparring match at the academy. The crowd cheered, their voices rumbling, their fear melting into excitement, convinced the human's strange luck would finally end. The horn sounded. Jirok wasted no time, charging with terrifying force, the ground trembling under each step. He struck with claws that could shred stone, his movements fast for his size, overwhelming in power. But Daniel did not meet the charge with force. He moved aside, quick, smooth. His eyes always locked on Jirok's shoulders, his hips, his breathing. Every detail was a clue, every move me. And a map. The claws tore the air where Daniel had been, slamming into the arena wall with an echoing crack. Jarek snarled, pulling back, his armored plates scraping sparks against stone. Daniel's voice was calm, cutting through the noise. You think armor makes you untouchable, but armor only slows the hunt. Jarek roared, swinging wildly, his strength shaking the floor. Daniel stayed just beyond reach, every step measured, every dodge timed to the edge of danger. To the crowd, it looked as if the human danced on the knife's edge of death, always one heartbeat away from destruction, and yet somehow he was never caught, never struck. Minutes passed, Jarek's fury burning hotter, his claws tearing trenches through the ground, his breath growing ragged. Daniel's movements stayed steady, his face calm, his eyes sharp as steel. The professor leaned forward, studying the human, not with amusement now, but with something far darker. Recognition. Then it happened. Jarek raised both claws high, bringing them down like hammers meant to crush Daniel once and for all. The crowd roared in anticipation, already imagining the human broken beneath the strike. But Daniel did not dodge away. This time he stepped forward, inside the arc of the claws, too close for Jarek's strength to matter. His hand struck once, twice, 3 times. Throat, joint, ribs, not brute force, but precision. And Jarek stumbled, his massive body collapsing to one knee, the air leaving his lungs in a sharp hiss. Gasps echoed through the arena. The human had moved like no beast, no cadet, not even like a soldier. He had moved like something else entirely, something that studied its prey until the moment to strike was perfect, and then ended it with cold precision. Daniel stepped back, letting Jarek collapse fully. He spoke, his voice low but clear, carrying into every corner of the hall. You call us weak because we are not built with claws or fangs, but our strength is not in what we are given. It is in what we take, in how we learn, in how we turn every weakness into a weapon. The silence was crushing now. No alien laughed, no cadet shouted, even the jeers had died. Every eye was on the human, not with amusement, not even with curiosity, but with the dawning edge of fear. Professor Zeeland's tendrils glowed dimly, his face unreadable, but his voice carried weight. You adapt, you strike with intelligence, but tell me, human, do you kill with mercy or with hunger? Daniel's gaze turned toward him, sharp and steady. We kill because we must, he said softly. But when we choose, we kill because we can. The words hit like a thunderclap. The cadets shifted, wings twitching, scales rippling, claws tightening on the railings. They had come to laugh at a weak creature, but now slowly they realized they were not staring at prey. They were staring at something that had no limits, something that looked at predators the way predators looked at prey. Daniel's eyes scanned the crowd, not proud, not boastful, only certain. You forgot us, he whispered again, but you will not forget again. The arena stayed silent for a long, heavy moment, and then for the first time the crowd did not cheer for their champions. They whispered of the human, the predator hidden in plain sight, the species that should never have been ignored. The arena floor was still cracked from the battles. Krivak lay defeated, Jarek broken, and the crowd that once laughed now whispered in uneasy silence. Daniel stood alone at the center, his face calm, his chest steady, his eyes sharp like a predator that had never lost its focus. He had not shouted, he had not bragged, but somehow his quiet words carried more weight than all the roars of his opponents. Professor Zeeland rose slowly from his seat above, his tall figure casting a shadow over the hall. His tendrils glowed dim, flickering like a fire sea. Aught between light and darkness, his voice carried across the chamber, low and deliberate. Interesting, human, you have skill, you have cunning, you have patience, but these are traits of hunters, not proof of an apex predator. Tell us, why should we believe your kind stands above the monsters I have studied for centuries? Daniel's gaze turned to him, calm, steady, almost unsettling in its stillness. You study predators in cages, Professor, he said. We lived among them, fought them, and became more dangerous than any of them could ever be. The hall stirred, whispers rippling like a storm wind. The professor's eyes narrowed, his curiosity growing sharper, his pride beginning to shift into something colder. Then show us, he demanded. Show us what makes humans feared. Show us what makes you unforgettable. Daniel nodded once, then raised his voice, speaking not just to the professor but to every alien in the hall. You think predators are dangerous because of their claws, their fangs, their venom, but these are nothing compared to what we carry. He began to tell them of humanity's wars, how humans had not only hunted beasts, but had turned their hunger for survival against each other. He spoke of battles that consumed continents, of soldiers who fought through fire, through storms, through famine, never stopping until their enemies lay in ruins. He described weapons made not of bone or claw, but of metal and fire, weapons that struck faster than lightning and farther than the eye could see. Gasps filled the chamber, some students trembling, others staring wide-eyed. Daniel's voice did not rise, but the weight of his words pressed on every listener like a predator's gaze in the dark. We learned to fight not because we wanted to, but because survival demanded it. And when survival demanded more, we created fire that swallowed cities, storms of iron that fell from the skies, and suns that we forged with our own hands. Professor Zeeland's tendril dimmed, his body shifting back slightly. What you describe, he said carefully, sounds less like survival and more like madness. Daniel's eyes locked on him, unblinking. To the prey, predator always looks like madness, he replied. The silence was sharp, cutting. Even the boldest cadets who had mocked him earlier now kept their eyes low, unwilling to meet his gaze. They could see it now, not just in his words, but in his calm certainty that his people were not merely survivors, but something greater, something hungrier. The professor tried to regain control, his voice louder now. Stories and threats do not prove dominance, human. If you claim so much, then there must be evidence, something undeniable. Daniel nodded, his lips curling in the faintest shadow of a smile. There is, he said. Look at us. Look at what we are. We are a species born from a death world. Every step of our history is written in blood. Every scar on our planet is proof, and yet we are still here, stronger than before. He took a slow step forward, his voice lowering, forcing every ear to strain to hear. Predators kill until they are full. Humans kill until the fight is done, and sometimes we do not stop even then, because for us the hunt is not about hunger, it is about victory. The words sank deep, twisting inside every listener. Some cadets whispered in fear, some clenched their claws in frustration, but none could deny the chill that crept along their skin. The insectoid cadet who had mocked him earlier finally spoke again, its voice weak but trembling with anger. Then you are not predators, it spat. You are monsters. Daniel's eyes turned to it, his gaze sharp and merciless. Perhaps, he said, but monsters are the predators even predators fear. The hall froze, the words echoing like thunder. Professor Zeeland's tendrils dimmed fully now, his body still, his eyes locked. Ket on the human, he had begun this day certain of his knowledge, certain of his supremacy as the greatest mind on predators. But for the first time he felt a tremor of doubt, a shadow that whispered that perhaps he had overlooked something far greater. The students stared at Daniel, not as prey, not even as an equal, but as something far more dangerous. And Daniel, standing calm in the center of the arena, knew he had achieved what he wanted. They would never laugh at humanity again. The hall was silent, not the silence of peace, but the silence of fear, of realization, of something too heavy to ignore. Professor Zeeland, who had once spoken with pride of Galaxy's greatest predators, now stood still, his tendrils dimmed, his glowing eyes locked on the human who had shattered centuries of certainty. Daniel remained at the center of the arena, his presence steady, calm, almost terrifying in its quietness. He had defeated their strongest cadets without rage, without boasting, only with precision, patience, and certainty, and his words still hung in the air like a shadow over every mind. Finally, the professor broke the silence, his voice no longer mocking, no longer proud, but careful, almost respectful. You have spoken of humanity as predator. You have shown us cunning, endurance, and will. But tell me, human, what truly separates your kind from the beasts of the galaxy? Daniel's gaze swept across the hall, meeting the eyes of alien cadets, warriors, and scholars. His voice came soft but sharp, carrying into every corner. What separates us is not strength, not speed, not claws or venom, he said. It is choice. Predators kill because they must, but humans kill because they choose to, and sometimes we choose not to. The words cut deeper than claws. Aliens shifted in their seats, some trembling, some whispering, because they all understood the meaning. Choice was more terrifying than instinct, because instinct could be predicted, but choice could not. Daniel stepped forward, each word, like the strike of a blade. We are the only predators who imagine what comes next, who plan beyond the hunt, who remember every victory and every loss. We carry our wars in our blood, and we teach our children never to forget. His voice grew colder. That is why we stand above every beast you name, because while they fight for food, we fight for survival, for victory, for the future, and sometimes, simply because we decided the fight was ours to take. The professor's tendrils flickered weakly, his voice almost a whisper. And what does that make you, human? Daniel's answer was a single word spoken with quiet certainty. Unstoppable. The hall shook with the weight of it, not from sound, but from the chill that spread into every heart. Every alien in that room felt the truth in the human's voice, the certainty that his people were not just predators, but something far more dangerous, something that refused to be forgotten. He turned his eyes back to the professor. You listed the predators of the galaxy, the rulers of their worlds, but you forgot the one predator that does not stop at one world, the one predator that looks at stars the way others look at prey. Gasps echoed, the truth hitting like a thunderclap. Daniel's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of his entire species. We are not bound to one forest, one sea, one sky. We are hunters of worlds, hunters of futures, and when we step into the dark, we carry fire with us, fire no predator can withstand. Some cadets lowered their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Others whispered in fear, realizing that the human before them was only a student, a single voice, and yet he spoke with the certainty of billions. Professor Zeeland's shoulders sagged, the pride in his eyes fading into something he had not felt in centuries. Humility. He bowed his head slightly, his voice quiet. Perhaps it is true, Perhaps we did forget, but the galaxy will not forget again. Daniel's expression softened, but his voice remained sharp. See that it doesn't, he said. The arena lights dimmed, the crowd remained silent, and the human turned away, walking calmly toward the exit. He did not look back. He did not need to, because every alien in that hall would carry his words, his presence, his warning for the rest of their lives. Later, the story spread through the academy, then across the systems, whispered from one world to another. They spoke of the day a professor listed the galaxy's apex predators, and the human students stood up and said, "You forgot one." And they remembered the silence that followed, the fear, the certainty, the truth, that the most dangerous predator in the galaxy was not the beast with claws or fangs, but the species that chose, that learned, that endured. Humanity, the forgotten predator, was remembered at last.